not offering one-size-fits-all solutions, and we have to make sure that we're really engaging with the students that we're serving or the populations that we're serving when we design analytics applications or tools to make sure that we're understanding their unique needs and serving them well. So speaking of analytics, for the last going on 10 years, we've had the Compass or the UCI Compass initiative, which is the initiative under which we started rolling out all kinds of analytics applications for the campus and really trying to drive data-informed decision-making. It includes all sorts of things, including data literacy and tool use trainings, collaborations around data sharing, design, the way that we implement our reports and our tools, centralized data governance that brings together lots of different parties from around campus to decide how is it appropriate to use data at large in these kinds of applications, and centralized data via our student data warehouse, which brings in lots of different sources and provides the campus with standardized longitudinal data that includes all sorts of things ranging from enrollment to admissions information and so on. So that the UCI Compass initiative has really been a boon for a lot of our activities. We come from the Teaching and Learning Analytics division of the Compass initiative, and specifically we focus on making applications and dashboards for academic advisors, for instructors, for academic leaders, lots of things that inform how we're educating at UCI, what outcomes are like for students, and to drive decision-making around things like curriculum. But notably, we don't have anything that is specifically for students. We recognize this as a serious gap, and Spark is how we set out to try to address that. So as with all of the things that we build, and I mentioned before with our diverse campus, it's really important that we listen to the people we're trying to serve. So it all started by listening to our students. And for that, I'll hand off to Ray.
Thanks, Jeremy. So as Jeremy said, the first thing we wanted to do is actually talk to students. So we weren't just building something random and arbitrary that may or may not help them. So last summer we went out and I worked with one of our talented user experience researchers on one of our other teams. And we decided to not ask about technology directly or what tools and things we could build to help them, but instead just kind of get a better sense about who students were, how they viewed themselves at UCI, what they wanted to, when they wanted to study, how they self-regulated their learning, all that kind of stuff. We asked a couple of technology adjacent questions so we could get at some of the answers that we wanted. You can see here, these are the research questions that we wanted to answer. We had about 20 interview questions that all contributed to this. Our process was a pretty straightforward user research process. We planned interviews, conducted them via Zoom remotely. Then we actually used artificial intelligence. We pulled all the transcripts out, ran them through Anthropic's Claude model, and had it answer questions to do sort of a meta-analysis on those questions. As the first time we've tried that process at UCI. So just tying into the other track that we're not part of, but we used AI for this, so that was kind of fun. Some of the key things that we pulled out of that were that our current students are not competitive. They almost all said they don't want to compete with their peers. They don't want to know how their friends did on their tests, but they do want context. They want to know how they're doing relative to their peers without knowing how their peers did. So, mean and median, all that kind of stuff. Those sorts of statistics and analytics are of interest to them. UCI itself is built around a giant park in the middle of the campus. There's a 1 mile ring road that goes around said park. And multiple people just mentioned that they like to go on walks around the park. They take a break from studying just by going through and relaxing for a little while, or maybe even study in the park. That's pretty common for our students too. This background picture here is the park, which a lot of people are surprised UCI is in the middle of Orange County, California. We have this giant park just chilling there. So our opportunity there was that wellness resources could be one of our key differentiators. So rather than focus on class resources, which other tools do a fantastic job of, things like My Learning Analytics, does that really well out of Michigan. So we're kind of focusing on this out of class, this holistic student experience potentially. We also found one student was a neurobiology major, and they point out that they've played Lumosity, which is a brain training app. They had an 1,800-day streak as of last summer. I hope they still have their streak. It would be like 2,000 days by now. That kind of points out that personalization is key, something that really resonates to students that they can use that ties into their interests. So these became key guiding principles for the tool: supportive, personalized analytics, wellness resources, and a personalized experience for them. The next few slides are diving a little bit more into that user research. Again, we asked about comparison with peers. You can see here some of the pull quotes from the analysis of the research on the right-hand side about how they, what they want to do. And again, the focus was on self-improvement rather than winning. They want everybody to do well. but they want to know how they're doing relative to their peers without knowing exactly how their peers did. They don't seem to be as competitive as previous groups of students. This held true also, especially for our competitive programs. Our School of Biological Sciences tends to be a very competitive unit for our students, and even the students we had from BioSci who participated were less competitive than I would have expected, while still caring deeply about their academic performance. We also learned that our students really want feedback. They want to know how they're doing. So this is kind of where the idea of the analytics came into play. We can visualize that a little bit better than we think Canvas can, provide additional context based on how their peers are doing and how they're doing in their other classes. One thing we found interesting was that they all want personalized feedback from their professors, but they also recognize that their professors don't have time, especially in large classes. So that self-awareness was nice to hear. They acknowledge that we don't have enough TAs to do the grading, all those sorts of challenges that higher ed is facing right now. But we can provide feedback about their activity in the LMS and their engagement with the LMS. So, we can't tell them how they did on their exams and why they did well or did not do as well as they had hoped, but we can at least guide them to more feedback about how they're interacting with their course materials. We also asked them what resources has the university provided that they've taken advantage of, and the slide is not meant to be read. It's more meant to just show the breadth of resources that UCI offers, which is common with many universities, right? We all have tons of offices offering tons of resources to tons of students. And by the time a student graduates, they may have actually figured out how the whole system works. Our goal with Spark is to make that process easier. We want our students in the first year to understand the breadth of what they have through Spark, which you'll see how we're looking to accomplish that. Sorry about that. But we have a lot of these resources, and we want to link students to them more intelligently than in the past. We also ask questions that kind of get at whether or not they want a tool like Spark. These are just pull quotes that show that, yes, they do want something that combines academic performance, engagement, and wellness data all together into one app or one tool. And with that, I will hand it back to Jeremy.
Yeah, so with that, enter our new application, Spark. So Spark at its essence is a personalized, data-driven dashboard based upon LMS and UCI data that links students with targeted resources to support well-being and success. A little bit of a mouthful, but really what we're doing is we're taking the breadth of data that we have about students on our campus, using it to better understand their context and what their potential needs might be, to tell them about what their context is, how they're doing in their courses relative to their peers, what kinds of services they're interacting with, and then to feed them targeted guidance, actionable next steps that they can take based on their circumstances that we think will have a high return on investment for that student. Ideally, when we're giving them guidance, we want them to feel like if they're seeing it, it means that it's of value to them, and they should pay credence to that. They should click on that thing and pursue whatever it is they're seeing because they know that it's been targeted specifically for them, as opposed to a large blanket email that goes out to the whole campus. So the key pieces of this in terms of our design philosophy are that it needs to be data-driven. This was largely enabled by the Unizin Data Platform. It's purpose-built for students. As Ray said, we started with research on students, and they're really at the core of this application, the sole focus. It's mobile first because we know that a lot of students are going to be engaging with it via their phones. It's partnership centric, meaning we had to work with lots of parts of campus to pull together all of these resources and to make sure that we have something to meet the needs of every student that's out there. And we're making it in a portable way because we think it would be valuable here, but we know other campuses have similarly complicated student success infrastructure, and we hope that they would be able to benefit from a tool like this too. So the degree that we can, we're making it so that other folks can take advantage of it. So to look at the actual application, this is the entry point, the main dashboard that students see when they come in. The highlight here is those 4 items in the middle that we call sparks, or the actionable things that students can do. We hope that they spark them into action, so hence the name. So each one of these is going to be something that we've identified that the student hopefully can take advantage of. And if they click on it, it takes them off to more information about that spark. On the right side, you have a list of courses that students enrolled with, and they can go through those to get to analytics about the particular courses. Again, this is all designed to be mobile friendly. So if you pull this up on a phone, it's going to lay out really nicely. And we plan to refresh this on a weekly basis. So every week a student can come back and get new guidance based on what we're seeing about their activities on campus, what it is they've been doing in their course spaces, and so on. So you can imagine that if a student had trouble in writing courses in the past, and we see they're enrolled in a writing course now, maybe we offer them the Writing Center as an opportunity for them. A third-year student who's never checked into the Career Center, we point them in the direction of the Career Center because we think it's time for them to start planning to get a job. The Career Center recommends starting at least 2 years early. Maybe they spend a ton of time in Canvas relative to their peers. But we see their intermediate scores are actually really strong. We can recommend they go take a walk in that big park that's in the middle of campus because engagement in nature may bring down the stress level that we are assuming they may be experiencing. So as far as the course analytics go for particular courses they might go into, most of this data is coming out of the learning management system, Canvas. We want to show approximations of their performance and their activity in the courses relative to their peers. So these are rough graphs of what we think it might look like. We're still refining this, but the idea is that they get non-quantifiable values that show their relative positioning. So we're not going to show what their actual scores are on quizzes, or we're not going to show how many minutes they spent in the course space, but we're going to show them relative to their peers roughly where they are in a more abstracted way. Part of that is to prevent people from trying to gamify this by seeing their actual numeric values or disclosing information that's demotivating. If you know you're not doing well, you already know you got a low score in the thing, but we just want you to see where you lie relative to other folks in the field. This particular interface, we also plan to make LTI friendly so that it can be integrated into Canvas down the road. If you go in from a particular course base, it should take you right to your analytics for that class. So that's another way we hope to make this more accessible in the future. Questionnaires are a key piece of this. When a student comes in at the beginning of a quarter, at the end of the quarter, even potentially in the middle of the quarter, we plan to offer them questions where we'll ask them about, what are your goals for this course? Do you want to get an A, a B? Do you just want to pass? How do you feel in terms of your preparedness for this course? What steps do you think you might need to take to be successful in this course? Research has shown that taking that moment, that metacognitive moment to think about what you'll need to be successful actually improves outcomes. So a piece of this is to have students reflect upon that. But also we hope to be able to use this for things like research to see how students are feeling going into classes to inform the kinds of guidance that we're giving in the tool. What am I missing? Oh, another piece is students will be required to complete these surveys before they see their analytics in a particular class. So that's a little bit of a carrot to get them to actually go through and fill these out. Another thing that we'll potentially be able to do down the road is take things like their goals and tailor what they're seeing in the analytics to that. So if you want to get an A versus if you just want to pass, we can compare you to students who've had those kinds of outcomes in the past and give you guidance that's actually geared to how other people who performed at the level that you want have approached it before. Lastly, we have the resource library, or what we call the empowerment library. This is the list of things on campus that we want to be able to offer to students. As I said before, this will be offered in targeted contexts, so either that entry dashboard or specific to a class that they're in. But we also want to make this a reference resource, something that students can go through and browse. So everything that we have pulled together for targeting, they can also go in and do searching, filtering, find things around campus that might be good options for them. So we don't want to limit it to just what we've targeted to you. The key piece is that targeting, but it should also be searchable. So that's what this will bring. So with that, there are really two major tracks that we've been following in developing Spark. One is the analytics piece, the engine, if you will, the actual implementation that makes it all work. But the other piece is this resource library, the empowerment library, and bringing together all of these resources so that we can then load them into the Spark application. That's been a whole effort unto itself. So I'd like to take a little time to talk about the empowerment library. We put together a work group that we call the Empowerment Library Work Group, creatively enough. It's actually coordinated by our IT group that's interfaced, but that's implementing the tool. I'm actually the chair of this work group. And it's a broadly representative group of folks from all around campus, people who are involved in student success, people who we've picked out because they have specific knowledge about student success efforts, who have been engaged in evangelizing student success in the past, people who are in advising, people who are in the Writing Center. We really wanted it to come from a large swath of student life so we could get liaisons to these spaces and bring in unique ideas from around campus for what might be able to be actionable steps for students to take, and how we might best target those things to students to show it to them at the right time. We've met with this group bi-weekly via Zoom, and so far we did a lot of brainstorming around like what makes a successful Spark. what are ways that we would want to target these, or what are ways that we want to phrase these so that they're motivating rather than demotivating. This group has been really useful for providing a mirror to the work that we're doing, getting really valuable feedback from people on the front line of student success, and implementing the tool in a way that we think will do no harm for the people using it. And it's also led to a lot of evolution in terms of the way that we approach actually building Spark and positioning these pieces of guidance. We've ended up with a list of over 70 potential Sparks, and we're working through them now to really refine them, connecting with the related offices to make sure that we're positioning their services in ways that they want, getting the phrasing just right, making them uniform but unique such that they're attention grabbing. So this work continues, but really having this be an integrated effort that involves much of campus has been really important to the success of the project thus far. In the future, we also hope that the people participating in this will be able to evangelize the product itself, get out there, vouch for Spark, get people using it, and generate energy around it. So one of the neat things that's come out of the work of the Empowerment Library Work Group was the design of the Sparks themselves, these little pieces of guidance. The original designs looked a bit different from this, and really through iteration with that group, getting lots of feedback, we've arrived at this design. Each Spark begins with a call to action, something that's attention grabbing but descriptive of the service that we're offering. Then a description that's a little bit more straightforward of the thing that we want them to do. Each one has an associated office that the student can refer to that's offering the service. And then each one gets a category, and that's a relatively recent addition. The categories are meant to make sure that we're covering a wide swath of student well-being, not just learning needs or academic success, but also things like writing and communications, connecting and engaging, well-being and thriving, learning and studying, and preparing for the future. We know all of these are going to be important to student well-being, and by using these labels, we can make sure that A, we've addressed each of these areas of student well-being and success, and that B, we are targeting these things to students in an evenly distributed way. So they're not just getting a boatload of Sparks about how to study better, but they're also getting maybe something about studying better, something about well-being, something about preparing for their career in the future. So they're getting a broad swath of guidance. Lastly, we have calls to act or secondary actions at the bottom of each Spark. So these are things like save it for later so they can go back and refer to it in the future. Don't show me this again if it's something that they're not interested in. Feedback so they can tell us, did you find this helpful? Did you find this demotivating? And so on. So with that being what the application is, I'm going to hand it to Ray to talk about how it actually works.
Thanks. So the short answer is magic. The better answer is a combination of data from the LMS and the SAS by the UDP, the Empowerment Library that Jeremy is heading up and gathering all those resources and getting them in, some calculated scores that we're pulling out, which I'll be going into more detail about in a moment, some more magic to actually match all these things together. That's what our team is working on now, and then generating these personalized Sparks. So Spark itself, just for those folks who aren't as familiar with the UDP, the UDP is pulling in data from Canvas, so pulls in events data and context data. So what it's the data within Canvas, how students are doing when they're turning assignments, all that kind of stuff, and then the actual events that they're generating when they click on pages, when they click to submit assignment, that kind of thing. The data that we're pulling in from UCI is all of our students, a bunch of demographic data, their academic progress, all that sort of stuff. And that all goes and flows into the UDP. And as it was put this morning, it's all harmonized in this really wonderful data set. Then Unizin continues to provide a lot of value here by generating all these data marts for us. They just released a student activity data mart that we're actually leveraging for this based on Indiana and their activity score. So we're pulling that in as part of this. We're also calculating a performance index that we're using as well. So when we decide which Sparks to show, we're looking at who a student is, what the student is doing, how the student is performing, the classes the student is enrolled in, as well as the resources at the university that may appeal to them based on all of that other data, with the goal being that when they're viewing these personalized Sparks, it is something of interest and useful to them. Jeremy showed a couple screenshots that show how Spark will work. The Sparks that you saw on there are draft Sparks, and it wasn't personalized yet. But the goal is to show them, 3 or 4 personalized Sparks every week that they can actually take action on to have a positive impact on what they're doing. And this magic algorithm in the middle is that secret sauce that we're working on. Not so secret sauce. We'll be talking about on Blitz once it starts working. But that this is the essentials of how Spark will work. And then I have some more slides. I'll talk about the technical underpinnings, all that kind of stuff as well, which is the next slide, coincidentally enough. So Spark itself is being built to be extremely modular. You can see here one of our developers put together a lovely diagram to help to outline this. Our goal is to support multiple calculated scores, such as the activity index and performance index was the first 2 we have, and maybe we'll have more in the future. We wanted to make sure that we weren't limited by just 1 or 2 scores. Technically speaking, it's a .NET 6 application written in C# using Blazor on the front end, Microsoft SQL Server on the back end. I can go more to that if people would like later on. Our goal is to make this extremely flexible and extremely shareable. So we're leveraging as many common technologies as we can. It uses Shibboleth to authenticate into it. The data is exclusively driven from the UDP. We don't have any custom data pulls from UCI specific data sources. And if we do need to explore that in the future, it would just be another one of these campus data services here that would plug into the side. And anybody who's interested in adopting Spark could adapt that to meet their campus data needs as well, or pull in additional sources, whatever. So our goal with this is to make it extremely shareable, and we're working on both the technical side of that as well as the policy side. So what actually goes into calculating the scores that we have? So we're using a Canvas activity index using the Indiana research-based data marts. We're doing a little bit different than Indiana's doing. They're looking at, I believe, the student and then octiles relative to their peers at their academic degree programs. We're looking at a section level for each student. So we're going a little bit more fine-grained with what we're looking at. The 4 variables that go into that are assignments submitted, assignments due, active minutes during the week, and sessions across the week. And there's a calculation on the right that generates an activity score. The nice thing about this is, I think I have some pros, I'll probably be repeating myself in a moment. The nice thing about this is these are pretty common activities, right, in Canvas. This is kind of the minimum usage of Canvas if you're using it for assignment submission. It doesn't take into account other things like direct engagement in discussions or involvement in LTI tools. It's kind of implied through the activity, the active minutes within the LMS. But there are additional variables that we're looking at considering pulling in the future. I already mentioned the data mart we're using and the 4 variables, and this is just a screenshot from the fantastic UDP docs that are available on the resources site and the 4 that we're using. And again, our pros that we really like this activity index because it's calculated for us. Doing this on our own would be really hard, and having a data mart that does it for us honestly just saved us a whole bunch of time and lets us focus on things like the empowerment library and building this web application and not doing a bunch of data processing. We're thinking it's probably performant enough that we could do these on the fly, although we're looking at calculating it and storing it weekly. One benefit of calculating it and storing it is it makes this available to researchers through data marts that we're thinking of providing to them. So the more data we can store, the richer the data that we can provide to our researchers. Some of the cons that we have so far, we wanted to let students choose their goals and targeted grades in classes. Do they want to make this their primary focus? This is what they really want to earn an A in. Are they okay with a B? Or do they enroll in this class using our pass, no pass option? So they just need to pass the class. We like to show their activity to ensure their performance relative to those goal bands. So that may require some calculation on our part, since we'll have to figure out how that goal setting works. It also doesn't take into account any unique student demographic characteristics or differences in what they're bringing, from their lived experience into the university experience. So it's reducing all students. Reducing is probably not the best term, but it's making all students into one of these calculated numbers, which can obfuscate some of the unique characteristics of students. But we're being open about that and acknowledging it, so at least we have that out in the open. These are the 2 ways that we currently have for visualizing activity. Jeremy shared a screenshot of an early prototype of Spark. So on the left side is that aggregated activity. Each point on the chart is a week, and the height is their performance or their activity within the class for that week. And that is as abstracted as we can make it. We may make it less abstract in the future. We'll be doing a series of co-design workshops, partnering with our School of Education researchers to help students tell us what they would find most effective in data visualizations. So these will grow as we get that student data. On the right side is a Power BI dashboard that we threw together using the data mart to help us to visualize this. We also use these dashboards to actually find classes that are using Canvas enough to make Spark useful for these visualizations, which I can touch upon as well if anybody has questions about that process. But these dashboards have been pretty useful, and again, we're pretty easy to spin up. I know I don't really have to sell the UDP to folks at the Unizin Virtual Summit, but the data marts have made this a lot easier for us to do our work. Moving on, I already mentioned this, but we want to make these relative to the goal bands, more personalized based on the student's own goals and focusing on the students who have those specific goals. So if I want to earn an A in this class, it would be nice if I was looking at my activity and eventually performance relative to other A students in the class. There's also a desire to look back in time. If an instructor's been teaching in Canvas similarly for years, we have a lot of historic data that we could pull out as well to help students understand, how to gauge their activity in the class. The cons of this are that we'd have to calculate it on our own for now. And again, it still doesn't take into account those demographic characteristics. The other score that we're looking at calculating is the Canvas Performance Index. We're doing a very rudimentary calculation, which may seem arbitrary and abstract, as I mentioned in my cons, and that's because it is a little arbitrary and abstract. We're trying this as our first iteration, and we'll go from here. But we're using one of the data marts that generates, that bins assignments into tiny, small, medium, large, and major based on its impact on the grade in the class, and we're just doing a simple, straightforward multiplication on that. So the large assignments are extra weighted, and the small assignments are barely weighted at all as part of this calculation. And again, one of our goals with these visualizations for students, these are the data marts we're using for this. One of the goals for these visualizations is we don't want students to come in here and try to gamify their performance. We want them to mostly just get a rough idea week over week. How am I doing this week? Am I doing okay? Am I not doing okay? How am I doing relative to my other classes? We have some ideas for visualizations, so they can see my math class here versus all my other classes. Am I under or overperforming relative to my other classes? A couple of things we also haven't taken account yet are classes that had no performance in a week. Right now, it just kind of dives to 0. That's a little demotivating because they didn't have any work to do, so why are we showing them a 0? So there's refinement to be done on these charts as well. On the right side is a Power BI dashboard pointing at the same data marts and visualizing that in a couple of ways. Again, mostly to help us find examples, but also just so we can kind of fine-tune our algorithm here if we wanted to. And we did find that straightforward calculation we did roughly corresponds to their performance in the class, so at least it has that going for it. Probably should sound more positive about that particular algorithm, but it is what it is. So the last couple slides we have, these are the specific data elements out of the UDP that we're using to feed into Spark. So we're looking at the bunch of the person tables, enrollment, course section, and course, pulling out data around, who students are, some of their characteristics. These are being used to match students. So you can imagine a first-gen student could be matched to our first-generation student center. Those type of straightforward matches, or maybe it's a combination of different characteristics and classes they're enrolled in, and how many what their GPA is right now. Maybe there's a more complicated Spark that involves multiple characteristics that go into determining the weighting on those. So this is what we're pulling in from the student and enrollment tables, and then from the Canvas data tables themselves. So mostly, if we were going straight into the tables, we're using data marts for this, so the data marts are doing this for us. But if we were going straight into the tables, these are the ones that we'd be doing. We do have a desire to look at things like quiz performance. There were some ideas around students who aren't doing or are doing well on quizzes. Maybe they get some separate interventions separate from their normal assignments. So we may dive more into that as well. So that is a rough idea and overview of how it works. So again, just to summarize, we have the 2 scores, the activity and the performance scores. Go back to here. The activity index and performance index that we're calculating out of the data marts, which is based on what students are doing in the LMS. We combine that with the student characteristics that come out of the UDP via our student information system. Use our magic to match them to resources from the empowerment library, and then show them their personalized Sparks on either their dashboard or at the class level if we have Sparks available at the class level. So that all manifests at the end of the day to look just like this dashboard that Jeremy shared earlier. So these sparks, look simple. 4 things appear on their dashboard, but really this is completely personalized based on their lived experience, university experience, or academic performance, the classes we've enrolled in, and all those other data sources that we're gathering into a system that is highly modular, highly flexible, highly extensible, and designed from the ground up to be shareable with all of you. With that, I'll hand it to Jeremy for the last slide, and then we'll be open for questions.
Yeah, so that is Spark, our new and first truly student-focused analytics application. We're really hoping that this is something that will help bridge particularly new students to the wide array of student success offerings that we have on our campus. Again, we have a really diverse environment. So this is going to be an attempt to try to have something for every student, the high performers, the low performers, those in the middle, and kind of every array of circumstances. So we're really eager to hear your questions, and this is still in development too. So ideas we're also eagerly seeking. So happy to hear what you have to share.
All right, thank you, Ray, and thank you, Jeremy. For Q&A, feel free to use the chat function in the room, and I will relay the questions as in the order they come in to our presenters.
Yeah, I'm going to go back really quick too. I glossed over the QR code that's available on this screen. So if you're interested in learning more, sharing this application with other people, that'll take you to our product website, tla.obptl.uci.edu/spark. You can learn even more there.
That's where we need that hold music again. I think one thing we didn't touch on in the slides is some of our timelines around the tool. So we're currently in active development. The screenshots that Jeremy shared are from a prototype of the tool. So we're pulling data from the UDP, we're generating the rough visualizations, we have a draft resource library logged in, and we're working on that matching algorithm now. Our plan is to have available for our summer session, which starts at the end of June, a limited pilot. We'll be partnering with a few classes to onboard them and have our students try it out and provide us with feedback. And then we'll be broadening that pilot into fall quarter, which is when we're hoping to be code complete on the first shippable version of the product. And then we'll be enhancing it over time based on how people are using it. We have a lot of ideas on enhancing how the personalization works. We have some ideas on goal setting and reflective questionnaires, letting students discreetly put in goals and then reflect back on those goals periodically. We have some ideas around facilitating apportioning study time and more control over their own schedule. So tools to help with that based on research that shows how long they should be studying, things like that. So it's really intended to be a platform for this data-driven student success at the end of the day, but really aimed at students, providing them with a platform and a tool to use.
I haven't seen any questions come in yet, but we still have some time before the end of the session. I know there were some technical issues for some of the rooms, and there are some people that probably joined late. For anyone that joined late, we will be recording every session and also sending out materials. So if you did miss something, apologies for that. We think we have it ironed out for the rest of the summit. So thank you for your patience. Any questions?
All right. We must have been very clear.
Oh, there's a question. This is from Andrew LaChapelle. How did you customize this for individual students?
Yeah, so the customization, I think, really comes in the diversity of the empowerment library, those resources that we're bringing together. We have really gone to lengths to try to find ways that we're able to draw in resources that speak to lots of different needs, whether they are a commuter student, a transfer student, connecting with resource groups all around campus who represent different student constituencies. This work is ongoing, and as Ray said, we're kind of starting small with our launch and growing out, but this is going to be a continuous process of connecting with people who are experts in different areas of the needs of our student body, having them look over at the library of things that we have and gradually grow it out so that we can be sure that we're meeting the right needs. One of the ways that we'll be validating this is looking at the actual analytics. We're collecting information about what we're showing to students, what they're clicking on, how often they're visiting. And we're going to look at the distribution of these pieces of guidance, these sparks that go out, to try to get a sense of whether some of them are being over-featured, whether there are students who aren't getting things that are as tightly targeted, looking at the profiles of those kinds of students and trying to find gaps. So in one way, the analytics around the data that we're gathering will help make sure that we have developed really a wide swath of guidance that suits the broad needs of our students. But it's one of those things where we have to get it out there first and then see the data and allow that to guide us in terms of what needs further development.
And then in addition to make all that work, we're pulling in all of the various criteria around students. So you should be able to see this criteria viewer tool that we have. But these are the various data elements that are being pulled in and associated to those various sparks. So this is how, lots of diverse data elements, a diverse set of sparks means that students should end up with that personalized, individualized experience at the end of the day.
We have another question that came in from David Gonzalez. How configurable is the platform, and can the instructor or student change their dashboard widgets?
Yeah, so right now we're leaning towards more of a curated experience. That's probably the nice way of saying they can't personalize it at all right now, beyond their goal setting. So that's the first iteration, is we'll be configuring that dashboard for them. As we build out the tool and add in more features, that's where we'll likely see some personalization, customization come in. For the classes, which we didn't really touch upon, one thing we want to have students do is opt into the visualizations. I don't want a student to click on a class that maybe they're not doing well in and see a bunch of charts that reinforce that they're not doing well. It's a little demoralizing. So each of the classes actually has individual settings there. They can opt in to view the analytics. They can opt in to view the class average if they want to see that, to see how they're doing relative to their peers, within the goal setting. So there's some opportunities for minor personalization there. But yeah, the dashboard is going to be that curated, automated experience, at least in the first version or two.
Yeah. With regards to the faculty piece, since that was raised, initially we're really focusing on the student experience because we have lots of tools for other audiences and we don't want this to get too diluted by other audiences, at least initially. So we're talking to faculty now about specific guidance they might give for certain large gateway courses, things like that, that we expect a lot of students to be seeing this tool in the context of. So guidance that we could give to those students. And generally about, having their class information show up in this kind of a format, getting their feedback about, based on their work with students, what they think their students would benefit from. Down the road, though, we have some ideas about how faculty and actually even students themselves might be able to contribute back into the ecosystem, whether they can give specific guidance for a course, things that they've seen work well, and we could say, oh, from your faculty, from your fellow students, kind of highlight those as guidance coming from other sources as opposed to the institution, or even allow for a little bit more customization. But that'll be down the road. This initial version is really squarely focused on just students and their interactions with the service.
Great. Any other last questions? We have about 3 minutes left. Well, if there are no other questions, there's one question that came in right as I was saying that. It's always the timing, right? When you're doing your canned wrap up, right? Okay. This is from Astrid Reed. Can you go into more depth on how you are building the empowerment library?
Hey, Astrid. Astrid's a bit of a plant. She's actually on the empowerment library work group. But yeah, sure, I'd be happy to, because we did kind of gloss over it. Yeah, this has been really one of the big efforts associated with this. And partially in response to that earlier question too, we knew that capturing the needs of a really diverse student body was going to be a challenge. So we began by actively recruiting people from all kinds of services around campus. We actually gave a presentation that's sort of a variation of this to all kinds of constituencies, whether it's housing from the academic portions of campus, registrar, and so on. And as we went to each, kind of expressed that we'd love to have their engagement in this work group. So we invited all these people together. This work started, gosh, probably 5 or 6 months ago at this point. And since then, we've been steadily meeting, providing updates on the development of the application to this work group, asking for their feedback, tweaking designs. There's actually one point where we took an extended break because we realized that there was a bit of a divergence between what we'd originally planned for the program, which is a little bit more academically focused, and what we were hearing from our work group members, that it's really important that it have more emphasis on student well-being, that we provide more information in the context of just a student's general involvement in the quarter, not specifically in a particular class. And we really took that to heart and went back and revisited some of our designs, tweaked it. The dashboard that you saw images of as the entry point was actually a result of that work. And we've come up with something that we think that, fortunately, we have the buy-in of this work group on, something that people are kind of agreed is going to better benefit our students and provide a more rounded wellness experience for those who use it.
Great. And we are now right on time, right at the top of the hour. So thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Ray, for sharing this really exciting work. And thank you all for, again, the patience with some of our technical difficulties and for engaging with us at the summit. Looking forward to the coming sessions. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kyle. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Thanks for coming out.